The ICJ has ruled that Israel's occupation of Palestine is unlawful and a de facto annexation. Let's talk about it. Here's the TLDR. The ICJ confirms in an advisory opinion that the Israeli policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory violate international law. This is a non-binding advisory opinion that cannot be enforced, but can have major impact. What is the case? Well, to be clear, this is not the South Africa case. These findings are in response to a request by the UN General Assembly from December 2022 to answer legal questions regarding Israel's policies. In short, the UN requested the ICJ to assess the legality and consequences of Israel's violation of Palestinian self-determination and Israel's prolonged occupation, settlement, and annexation since 1967. Why is this not enforceable? These advisory findings are in response to the United Nations request, rather than for a court case. In the US, this would be the equivalent of the Supreme Court responding to a constitutional question, rather than ruling on an actual court case with downstream impact. Also, the ICJ has no ability to enforce its findings and rulings. It relies on member nations to follow their rulings, thus often ignored. Part 1, on oppression and occupying power. Controlling Gaza's water, air, land, and life, Israel is the occupying power over the Gaza Strip, even if the military withdrew. This counters Israel's common argument that it is not occupying Gaza, and thus cannot be held responsible for suffering there. Israel is liable. Israel's policies do support settler activity, which are illegal. This counters Israel's common argument that they cannot be held responsible for the actions of individuals. Israel is liable. Exploitation of Palestinian natural resources, denial of water to Palestinians, and the use of Israeli military law on Palestinians are all illegal. These findings together firmly establishes and sets precedents that Israel's actions are illegal and must be held accountable. Number 2, on occupation and settlements. Israel's settlements amounts to annexation, including in East Jerusalem. Israel must thus end its presence in the West Bank and Gaza, ceasing all settlement activity and return to the 1967 borders. Israel must pay compensation to Palestinians. These rulings together establishes legal precedents that Israeli policies and settlers' violence all violate international law and must return the territories to Palestinians, albeit only to the 1967 borders. As these findings are not enforceable at present, they will likely be used as baselines for future negotiations. On global obligations, countries must refuse to recognize illegal Israeli claims to territories and must not aid Israel's occupation in the West Bank and Gaza. This will support future cases against countries such as the United States that have aided Israel's occupation or recognized Israeli settlements. What happens now? Because these findings are not enforceable, very little will change within the coming days. However, these findings can still have major impact. And occupation. While Israel is unlikely to reshape its current policies, this finding should allow global leaders to consider additional sanctions against settlers. Foreign action against Israeli settlements can play a huge role in shifting Israeli public opinion. International isolation. Countries have turned a blind eye to Israel-Palestine for decades, but the court now establishes that Israel's actions are illegal. Countries will subtly avoid Israel to avoid being seen as complicit in supporting a criminal state. For future cases, this case is an advisory opinion, thus not enforceable. However, the findings can be used as undeniable legal evidence for other cases, like the South Africa case.